Hello, my name is Trenton Davison, and this is my last video presentation for oceanography on coral reef ecosystems. So for my primary producer, I chose phytoplankton as they are an autotrophic plankton that go through photosynthesis to release oxygen back into their environment. These single-celled organisms use chloroplasts containing chlorophyll to absorb sunlight, ultimately converting it into energy. This is very useful for our world as these phytoplankton can be eaten by other organisms like crustacean or fish, which in turn are eaten by predators, which can be connected to us or can be decomposed back into their environment, making a full circle. Phytoplankton live in the pelagic zone or open ocean and is the base of the food web as they're autotrophs. Some adaptations that phytoplankton have made are their flagella, which help them with mobility, or their spines that increase surface area. For my primary consumer, I chose stoplight parrotfish because I've always found them interesting as they have beaks, and sometimes people say they have human-like teeth, but stoplight parrotfish are a little different. And they also produce sand from eating algae and coral by breaking off coral to grind up with their teeth in their throat, which I find very interesting. They defecate said sand and can produce up to 1 ton of this coral sand per acre in a year, which when you add that up, that's a lot of sand, as there's not just stoplight parrotfish, but there's also other subspecies. These parrotfish spawn their eggs in open water column and are pelagic organisms. I think the biggest adaptation that parrotfish have is their teeth structure, as it's not just their visible teeth like their beaks, but also their teeth in their throat and their digestive system to break up the algae and coral to make into sand. For my secondary consumer, I chose the black grouper because they're humongous, and this benthic fish can weigh up to 180 pounds and is marine raidfish, which means it's cartilaginous, basically like a shark made out of cartilage. Benthic, meaning living on the seafloor. They live close to, they like to feed at coral reef because there's a lot of fish there that they like. While black grouper are nectin, their larvae and eggs are planktonic, which makes sense because their eggs and larvae don't have any fins to swim with, so they'd basically be floating around in the open ocean. Some adaptations the black groupers have is their color changing abilities to hide in their surroundings, as well as their adaptation to change sex. I found that interesting because that's just weird. I know a lot of different animals can do that, but it's just different to me. They can change sex 11 to 14 years of age. They're born female and then can change to male, probably depending on how many females to males ratio. They usually change sex from 2 to 4 feet. Another adaptation that this fish has is their large jaws to suck up their prey, which their color changing ability helps with that as they can ambush. These groupers help to control the population of fish that graze on coral by keeping a sort of balance in the reefs. As I said, they like to feed on, they're bottom dwellers, so they feed on the reef fish. For my top predator, I chose the blacktip reef sharks as I like sharks a lot more than the other predators I saw. They're pelagic because they're active hunters, so they can move around pretty quickly by themselves. Very mobile. These sharks' primary food source are reef fish, but they like to eat most of everything. This nekton is often known to hunt in packs, pushing schools of fish closer to shore to feed with their serrated teeth, one of their adaptations. The black-tip reef shark has several other adaptations that primarily help with hunting, but another adaptation would be like scales to protect against parasites in the ocean. Another thing would be their colors to help with camouflage, as they have a lighter bottom and a more shadier, darker top. Also, they have snout pores that can detect electric signals from prey, and their sense of smell to detect injured or stressed animals in the vicinity. These sharks are considered important for keeping smaller fish populations stable in case of overgrazing, a lot like the black groupers. For my decomposer, I chose the polychaete worms because they're heterotrophs. They decompose on decaying matter, and they're a little bit like earthworms, but just marine. They convert this decaying matter into energy, which in turn can be eaten by other organisms, like crustaceans or fish, a lot like phytoplankton, but they're just not autotrophs. So they're another very important part of the food chain. Most of these worms are benthic and are a major part of benthic ecosystems, but there are a few subspecies that are pelagic and are more mobile. These worms are vital to the environment as they oxygenate the ocean floor, stabilizing shifting sediment, and are a major part of the food chain. Some adaptations that they can have, some species are transparent in the water, helping them with hiding from predators. Some live in cold seeps, which is where water-rich chemicals seep through the sediment, and they don't have to eat on decomposed animals. They're just living off the energy-rich chemicals. For my food web, as you can see, I put the top predator at the top. That seemed like the right idea to me. The black-tip reef sharks eat the grouper, the parrotfish, and I don't know why I didn't put the line there, but they can most definitely be decomposed by polychaete worms, but not really. That's never gonna make it there. The polychaete worms can decompose the black grouper, the parrotfish, and the phytoplankton. And the parrotfish and the polychaete worms are vice versa with each other. The worms can decompose the fish, and the fish can eat the worms. And then the autotrophs can be eaten by the worms. I don't have any crustaceans on here, so polychaete and phytoplankton are the most important organisms out of these five, due to the fact that one is a heterotroph and one is an autotroph. They are the base of the food web, basically. So they serve as food sources for many different organisms. It's basically just beating a dead horse. The importance of coral reef ecosystems. So coral reef ecosystems provide homes for all sorts of diverse marine species, and they're house to a lot of beautiful fish. They absorb over 90% of a wave's energy, which helps sustain coastal land. The species that make the coral reef their home can be a great food source for coastal populations and millions of people worldwide. These ecosystems are under threat from climate change, pollution, all sorts of stuff, which could destroy over 90% by, I believe, 2050. For my abiotic factors, these factors like salinity, temperature, sunlight, water currents, sediment levels, all affect and are affected by the coral reef ecosystem. For salinity, the levels need to be in the right range for adequate growth and survivability. This is usually between 32 and 42 parts per thousand. When there's too much or too little salinity, this affects osmosis, cell function, and the physiological part of the corals. These corals need the right amount of sunlight to help with algae activity for nutrition and growth. If they're too low, they don't get enough sunlight and can die off. If they're too high, they get too much sunlight, and it can also be very damaging. The reefs need tropical temperature to thrive, but are highly susceptible to increases in temperature, which can lead to coral bleaching, which is a major problem we have with coral reefs today, and we're trying to fix that. Water currents also play a factor because they deliver plankton and nutrient-rich water, but stronger currents can also damage the structural integrity of the coral reef. Diving into the subdisciplines, for physical, this is a lot like the abiotic factors above, but talking in this slide, we're going to be talking about temperature, light penetration, sediment formations. These factors can affect coral reefs by providing the proper requirements for coral growth, but can also be very damaging. If they don't have the right amount of light or temperature, the coral can release their algae through their pores and go through coral bleaching. These conditions can also favor species over other species, pushing certain types out of that environment. For the chemical subdiscipline, the most important, I would say, part of the chemical aspects would be ocean acidification. This is when the ocean absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, leading to decrease of pH levels over time. This also reduces the amount of carbonate ions which corals need for building their skeletal structure for stability. This leads to coral polyps producing their calcium skeletons at a slower rate. With a slower rate and not enough carbon ions, the coral reefs are more susceptible to damage, aiding in literally everything else like climate change and pollution. It's very destabilizing to the coral reefs. For my last aspect, for geological, the geology of the area that coral reefs reside impact them in a few ways, like influencing where the coral can grow and thrive, sedimentation, plate tectonics, and many more factors. Plate tectonics can produce volcanoes, which when subsided or sinking into the ocean, can be foundation for coral to grow over time. Subsidence is when the land slowly sinks, providing more space for growth. Different formations can protect coral reefs from currents and can dictate a reef's vulnerability. Locations like continental shelves provide feeding habitats and nursery grounds for various species, and other ones like trenches are not that great. They're more in-depth and are for organisms that have a lot of adaptations to survive in that type of climate. And that is all. To be honest, I'm very happy to go on winter break and not have to make video presentations, but I'm excited for my future.